Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I live in a relatively small city of 20,000 people in Sweden. I'm in year 11 and am pretty average student. Before this incident, I'd only been to the principal's office once for a matter not really in my control. I was more of a witness then. I have some friends around school, but I'm not the most social or well-known person. The story started around a year ago. My friend John and I were sort of low on money. We didn't really have anything specific to buy, but money is always great, right? Our old principal was an amazing person. He always had answers for people's problems and made sure that their problems were also his. He took a lot of time in the day to talk to students and make them feel motivated. This is not a big school, so he didn't have that much to do. Anyway, John and I planned to start a business from our lockers. These lockers were not very big, so we had to use 2 lockers to fit all the supplies. Or at least we thought that. My school allowed gum to be chewed anywhere as long as it didn't bother others. So we settled on selling gum and water, which people also wanted to buy after they stopped supplying mugs. We had a rocky start to the business. Our first friend started advertising our business, but with no success. We probably had 10 customers the first week, but it didn't even cover a tenth of our expenses. It didn't stop us. After a month, we had made about $10 in profit, and we were happy. This number rose some in the future, and after 3 months, everyone knew of our business, and even the teachers have bought from us. Our business tactic mainly revolved around getting our supplies from bulk buying from a website that sells products close to the expiration date. We also sold for a low price to have our products cheaper than a school cafeteria. The principal talked to us about the business, but since it didn't affect our grades, he was completely fine with it. He even recommended that we continue. All was well. Fast forward to 3 months ago, the principal had just retired, and we had gotten a new principal. He was useless at his job. He didn't fulfill any of the things he promised to bring us, and he was verbally mean to students and teachers. He acted as though he was greater than all others and made it everyone's job to remember. He once said, "You're not worthy of being an English teacher," to a teacher from Bristol with degrees from both English and Sweden colleges. He once went out of his authority to change the rules without board approval just to be right in an argument with me. It was about a hat in the school cafeteria. He also had small tantrums in his office at meetings when his ideas were democratically shut down. This prompted the board to change their mind about his outright bad ideas. As the icing on the cake, he found out about our lovely principal-approved business. He shut it down instantly by putting locks on our lockers without notice. These lockers had personal things in them, not to mention hundreds of dollars in supplies and payments, and it probably took 3 to 4 days to get him to open them. John and I had had about enough. We tried speaking with him about it, but he threatened to terminate John and our other friend, who at this point had bought into the business. This for us was a big thing. Also, he later did that. The full school board only meets every 2 months. We had enough time to read into the school bylaws and find both loopholes and arguments. We wanted our business back. I found out that the only thing we could strike was when the board was all together. So I made sure we were ready at that point. Time went by and I found out that I had proof of both him changing the rules earlier when he was in an argument with me and other times when he did it. But I also knew that it was grounds for questioning the principal's position. This wasn't my intent from the beginning, but at this point I was so fed up, I took whatever I got. For anyone thinking I read a bunch of books to get this information or something, no. I simply went on the school's website and searched for bylaws. This is a private school, so they must be available to anyone. This is a private school, so they must be available to everyone. Okay, game day. John and the others were ready to get our business back, and if we could, kick him out of his position. The board started pretty slowly, talking about common changes that probably wouldn't happen and other boring things. When it came time to ask questions and make suggestions, we were quick to start talking. Our new partner in business raised his hand. I'd like to question the new principal's position on the basis of verbal abuse. He at this point shot with his little 9mm. He waited to use a big cannon for dramatic effect. What? What do you mean? Against who and when? The principal was both fuming and simply choked to the bone. When you locked our lockers, you said some mean things. We have personal things in those. I quickly understood my friend's idea. He was going to wait to drop the big bomb and during the waiting time, mention every little bad thing the principal had done. You had an illegal trading business. It's against school. It's not. I checked the bylaws, and it's allowed for students to supply their fellow students with school supplies. I know I bend the rules a little, but I'd just argue that gum can be crucial for some people's minds to keep calm. My friend was now eager to drop the last bomb, the nuclear bomb. And to follow up on what he said, changing the rules without board approval is grounds for firing. And here is the evidence. I handed over the evidence, which was basically a printed copy of the bylaws and recent changes file in the newsletter, where I had circled the changes in question. I pointed out that these recent changes didn't happen at the same time as the board meetings when rules usually changed or got instituted. After the confrontation, everyone was instructed to leave. We were later told by the English teacher that the principal had been instructed to leave or else charges would have been pressed. He had apparently used some money meant for the school to buy a new car for himself, so he was also fined for that. But that's about everything that happened. We lost the man his job because he shut down our probably illegal business. We started the business again and everything went back to normal. So back when I was in my first unit, we had to chip all of our 7-ton trucks off to get up armored. That meant that over a year or so we chipped them all from South Carolina to Wisconsin. I was in charge of logistics at the time, so I coordinated it all and loaded the trucks. Overall, a pretty easy task. The only challenge was the documentation. Anyway, it was all going well until this new staff sergeant showed up in the motor pool. He was a jerk who treated everyone terribly. He made my life miserable when I tried to ship these trucks. I didn't want to do it. It wasn't overly fun, sometimes it even required me to work on weekends, so I would have been happy just not doing it. However, I had to because the headquarters of the Marine Corps ordered it, so there was no reason for him to be mean to me. Anyway, once he took over, shipping these trucks became a pain because he wanted to micromanage since I was a lower rank. So I let him and he wanted to sign as well. So I made up lines for him to sign. Finally, I had it with him. One day, I decided since he wanted to sign and be important, I would mess him up. So when my next big shipment, like 4 trucks, came along, I decided that instead of sending them to Wisconsin, as they were supposed to go, I would send them somewhere else. I decided 29 Palms, California would be a great location. So I changed some codes on the sheets, gave them to the staff sergeant who made more snarky comments and signed blindly. So off we shipped these trucks. A couple of weeks later, the call came in that our trucks never arrived. So the command started getting worried that a few trucks had gone missing. They came to our shop and we just informed them that the staff sergeant had taken charge of all the shipments lately. So they went to him. And he proudly said he had taken over but crumbled when they asked him where the trucks were. It took them a couple of weeks, but finally a call from 29 Palms came into our command that they had these trucks show up but nobody had claimed them. The command flipped out. As far as they were concerned, this foolish staff sergeant got involved in these things he didn't need to get involved in, and sent 4 big trucks across the country instead of where they needed to be. He got told to leave the logistics to the logistics department, and I had the whole thing solved in an hour. Edit. For those complaining about the taxpayer dollar, you obviously have not been in the military. I had incompetent leaders like this cost far more than a couple of trucks because they couldn't let the experts just do their jobs. One example was we had a C-130 fly from Bahrain to Jordan to pick up cargo. I was to load it, but the senior leadership didn't think I needed to go because a random non-logistics officer was at that base to load. So the C-130 flew internationally to get cargo, was never loaded, and then flew back. So the C-130 had to be sent back to Jordan the next day to get the cargo, all because someone had to stick their nose where it didn't belong. There are tons of other stories of poor leadership wasting taxpayer dollars. After this, the staff sergeant never even stepped foot in the logistics office, so perhaps he learned a lesson. I was working the front desk at the hotel when a group of sumo wrestlers checked in. They were all dressed in their traditional garb with thick mawashi belts around their waists and top-knot hairstyles. They stood out among the other guests, but not in a negative way. They were polite and respectful, bowing and thanking me as I checked them in. Their large size and presence commanded attention, but they were humble and soft-spoken, and I couldn't help but feel intrigued by their presence. I could tell they were here for a tournament, and I knew it was going to be an interesting stay for them. A few hours later, Karen checked in. She was loud, demanding, and had a sense of entitlement. She walked up to the front desk, and before I could even greet her, she started complaining about the room she had been assigned, demanding a room with a better view and a larger bed. Her voice was loud and grating, and she had a condescending tone. She immediately caught my attention, and I knew I was going to have a long shift dealing with her. She was dressed in fancy clothes and had a lot of expensive jewelry, which she flaunted in front of other guests. She had a sense of superiority and acted as if she was entitled to the best of everything. It was clear that she was used to getting what she wanted, and I knew it was going to take a lot of patience and diplomacy to deal with her. As the day went on, Karen spotted the sumo wrestlers in the hotel lobby. She started making fun of their appearance, laughing and pointing at them, and she made comments about their traditional clothing and hairstyles, calling them weird and ugly. The wrestlers were sitting together in a corner quietly talking among themselves, and they ignored her. But I could see that they were clearly uncomfortable, their expressions clearly showing the distress they felt. They tried to ignore her, but her comments were loud and could be heard by everyone in the lobby. I could see some of the other guests were also uncomfortable with her behavior and were looking away, trying to distance themselves from the situation. I knew I had to intervene before it escalated any further. So I approached Karen. "Ma'am, please refrain from making fun of our guests. It's disrespectful and not tolerated here in our hotel." I spoke in a calm but assertive tone, trying to make her understand the gravity of her actions. She turned to me with a sneer. "Why? They are just a bunch of weirdos in ridiculous clothes. They don't belong here." She looked around the lobby trying to find support in the other guests, but all she got were looks of disapproval. I could see that she was not used to being told no, and she was becoming increasingly agitated. I knew at this point that reasoning with her would not be possible, and I decided to take a more stern approach. "Ma'am, your behavior is not acceptable, and if you continue, I will have to ask you to leave the hotel," I said firmly. She looked at me with surprise. "How dare you? Do you know who I am? I'll have you fired for this," she shouted. But I stood my ground, knowing that I had done the right thing by standing up for our guests and the hotel's policies. One of the wrestlers, who spoke broken English, stepped forward and said, "We here for a tournament. Please respect our culture." He spoke in a calm and measured tone, trying to make Karen understand that they were in the United States for a purpose, and that her behavior was disrespectful and unacceptable. But Karen was not ready to back down and continued to provoke the wrestlers. She shouted and jeered at them, not caring about the impact of her words. She even pushed one of the wrestlers, not realizing the strength and power they possessed. The wrestler, who had been trying to remain calm, finally had enough and pushed her back with enough force that she stumbled and fell to the ground. The sound of her falling echoed through the lobby, and the guests who witnessed it could see that she was not hurt but humiliated. The wrestler immediately apologized to her. but she was too angry to accept it. Instead, she lost it even more and started throwing whatever she could find at the sumo wrestlers from a distance. She was picking up chairs, ashtrays, vases, anything she could get her hands on, and throwing them at the wrestlers. The wrestlers were trying to avoid her throws and move away from her, but she was relentless. She was screaming and demanding that the police be called to arrest the weird guys who had attacked her. I quickly called the police and explained the situation, providing them with the details of what had just transpired. I also informed them that there were CCTV footage that would show the whole altercation. When the police arrived, they immediately reviewed the CCTV footage and saw the whole incident unfold. They saw how Karen had been the instigator and how she had pushed one of the wrestlers before he pushed her back in self-defense. They verified that Karen was indeed the instigator of the altercation, and after hearing the testimony of the witnesses, they arrested her for disorderly conduct and assault on the sumo wrestlers. The police officers were professional and respectful, but they were firm in their decision to arrest Karen. They took her away in handcuffs, and as she was being led out, she continued to shout and curse, threatening to sue the hotel and the police. The other guests were relieved that the situation was finally over, and many of them approached me to express their gratitude for how I handled the situation. As the police were taking Karen away, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. I could see that she was not being used to being told no, and the way she acted was just a result of her sense of entitlement. She had never been held accountable for her actions and had never faced consequences for her behavior. I also felt bad for the sumo wrestlers who had been nothing but polite and respectful throughout the whole incident. They had come to the United States to compete in a tournament and had not deserved to be treated in such a disrespectful way. For background, I grew up in the hospitality industry with my parents who, to those behind the scenes, shared the power of a general manager, although my dad was the one who holds that position, has for more than 10 years now. Seeing as some of my earliest memories are of hotel rooms, front desk, and the general drama that happens behind the scenes, you'd think I'd be immune or at least more tolerant of nonsense. But that's a story for another day. As I said, I grew up in this business and helped out a lot, taking shifts occasionally and running errands for whichever of my parents were on shift. But I never actually got paid the same as the other employees. By that I mean my parents paid me from their own pay, which is fine. I hardly did the same amount of work they did in the same amount of time, which meant I wasn't on a payroll. Therefore, I wasn't technically an employee. Remember that. One of the few pieces that will come to play out in my favor. I also have to mention that my parents have managed more than one hotel in my lifetime, and for the past several years a common thing is for them to live in the hotel they manage, given it's in a completely different state than their house. My house now, thank you. So they have their own room. I can access it when I'm visiting, because when I'm there, I pitch in and help out, which commonly requires me to have a master key. Yes, one that opens all the door. They really don't look that much different from guest keys except for the markings or when the housekeepers wear them on lanyards. And the regular guest keys to work afternoon, which is the time you must be checked out or you will be charged for another day. One more piece to remember. There are 5 floors in total, but technically the second floor is where guests can use a side door. Can use a side door to access a parking lot and the rooms without going all the way from the lobby. It requires an active key card to work from outside, another piece. I don't tell anyone else this, and typically only a few staff members are aware of who I am anyways, the manager's daughter, so it's not really obvious. On my last visit, I was given a master key the day after I got there. I was told they'd call me if they needed my help. I am typically an introvert and stay in my room playing video games and reading, sometimes wandering out to spend time with my parents, wearing jeans and a graphic tank top and flannel. Nothing like what the clerks or employees should wear. I left my room with a book in hand, my phone and master key in my pocket, but you could really only see the outline of my phone. Another piece to come into play. This is where the background truly ends and the story begins. I was going to head down to the lobby with my book and sit on the couches to read, to hang out with my mother on her shift. She's a bookworm too, so we tend to read in silence together. When as soon as my door closed, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I could feel a disturbance in the force. Lo and behold, from behind me I hear the sound of a wild Karen. "Excuse me." My first thought was, oh boy. My second thought was, how fast can I annoy her? Yeah, I'm an introvert, but that doesn't mean I'm uncomfortable with drama or people. I just prefer to hibernate in the comfort of my living space. Big difference. In fact, on occasion, when confronted with, well, confrontation, I find I enjoy myself when I annoy the ever-loving heck out of them. I mean, I didn't ask for you to bother me, so that is your problem. I digress. This lady is what I classify as your stereotypical Karen, seems put together on the outside, but on the inside is just a freak show of entitlement and lack of empathy. I won't describe what she looks like because then people from the hotel would know exactly who she is. Anyways, I turned to face her, where I had been just about to step away from my room door, replying with, "You're excused." Which I know for a fact tends to irritate people, but to be fair, it's what one is supposed to say at one's dinner table in response. Yeah, we're not at a dinner table, but still. "You need to help me right now." My third thought was, now where have I heard that one before? Oh right, this is Karen. No, I don't. I'm just trying to go to the lobby. "Oh no, you're not. You're going to help me." Okay, this is where I realized that I had two major options. A, get upset and lower myself to her level, or B, ride this out to the perfect out of work here lady moment. While option A was tempting, I decided that I could hold off on reading for now. Fine. What do you need help with? "Well, you need to start doing your job and bring my bags out to my car." Whoa, hold up. Hotel employees do not do that. We weren't that big of a building or business to warrant bellboys. We had luggage carts and elevators for this particular reason. As far as I know, guests tended to understand that. Until now. Fine. You know what? I'll go along with it. So I head with Karen to her room, which is 4 doors down from mine, and she shoves this large suitcase. I'm talking everything but the kitchen sink large into my hands, and carries this tiny bag instead. The suitcase does have a handle, but when I reach for it, Karen snaps at me. "No, I said to carry it out." "No, you didn't." Karen gaped at me for a moment before replying with, "Yes, I did, and do your job and do not talk back to me. I'm a guest." So Karen is striding ahead of me by a few paces, while I'm somewhat struggling to carry this large suitcase. And by the time I get to the elevator, Karen is already standing beside it, where I set the bag down for a moment to catch my breath because, darn, that was pretty much my exercise for the week. "Hurry up or you're fired." I really would have broken the pretense right there, but I decided that at the side door is where I'll drop the bomb. Karen hops into the elevator, and by the time I'm able to pick up her suitcase, she'd already headed down. So on the stairs, I simply push her suitcase down each flight, hoping that I'm smashing a few breakables in the process. Yes, I was pity. Don't care. Karen is already out the side door by the time I reached the bottom with her suitcase. She didn't even notice that it had hit the bottom somewhat loudly. Before I pick it up, I check the time on my phone. 1:36 p.m. Karen was surely about to be charged for another day, or had been already. She hadn't been out of her room long enough to have met the 12 noon deadline, obviously. Therefore, her card would not work. Ah, karma. You show up just when I need you. So I walk over to the door with her suitcase in hand and open it, nearly throwing it out the door. And Karen screeches when I do. "You can't do that. I'm going to have your job for that, you useless witch." So not really mad, I stare at Karen amidst her rage beginning to rise when I don't start begging for forgiveness and simply say, "You can't really take what I don't have to begin with." "What? What do you mean?" I take a small step back from the door, but I keep my body kinda leaned forward with my eyes locked on hers, so she doesn't notice the moment. I would have called her lady in this next part if she hadn't cursed at me and called me a witch and useless. I don't work here, Karen. Thanks for staying, I say in a falsely cheery voice before I slam the door shut with all my might. The electronic clock clicks into place, thus leaving her outside. Did I forget to mention that she still had things in her room? Well, yeah, she was charged for another day and even told my mother about the rude bellboy. I'm a girl and imprisoned as one. What the heck? Locking her out. My mother tried to explain to her that since she wasn't checked out or out of the room after 12, then she would be charged for another day and that her keycard was only programmed for the nights she had paid for. Oh, and that we don't have bellboys. Karen eventually got her stuff, but still had to pay, and didn't get her security deposit back since she'd apparently damaged the door frame to her room. All in all, Bellboy 1 and Wild Karen, big fat 0. I was told that this would fit in here, so here we go. My co-worker just told me the story from several years ago. She was working for a court as a kind of front desk clerk. One of her main jobs was sorting out the official correspondence, making sure letters were received by the right people, replies sent in time, and so on. The job was alright, but the people she was working with were a mess. The general working morale was reduced to the bare minimum, and almost everyone was entitled as could be. Even the entry test was a hassle since they left more than 20 people waiting for over 4 hours before taking the test, which then consisted of ridiculously hard questions about the weirdest topics, from biology to physics to politics and geography, but also management-level things about human resource management, office organization, and the like. Half of the people had left even before the test had even started. She ended up getting the job, and it only went downhill from that awful start. People were rude, entitled, and generally unpleasant. Nobody lifted a single finger to do anything if it wasn't unavoidably their responsibility. On the day of the free consultation, when people could come in to get legal help for free, they would spend more than an hour just going out to a small cafe and let the people wait, even though it was not their break time. Especially her boss was a choleric and very self-centered man who thought he was the biggest fish of them all. One day, when she was going to the post office to send out a whole cart of letters, she injured her finger in an unfortunate accident. The doctor told her that she needed to keep the hand still and excused her from work. Her boss was not pleasant at all. He berated her on how incompetent and unprofessional this was, but ultimately he had to let her stay home, as per the doctor's order. When the few days were over and her finger still hurt a lot, the doctor extended her absence. She called her boss to tell him, and the man went absolutely crazy on her. He apparently yelled so loudly that a passerby could hear every word. She called right outside the doctor's door so he'd know as soon as possible. Aside from a lot of insulting slurs and general cussing, he gave her an ultimatum. Either she came in by the next day or he would personally make sure that she never ever got promoted, her salary raised, or added any benefits. He'd make sure she had no future in his place. Well, she decided to take her sweet time coming back to work, leaving her phone ringing. Several days later, she returned to work. Her boss was already waiting to yell at her some more before the first people arrived, but she looked at him, stone-faced, took out her notice of quitting, explained that she had accumulated enough vacation time for the remainder of her employment, and left. But not before noticing the giant piles of documents and letters on her desk that nobody else had even thought about touching. They also couldn't immediately hire someone new because she was technically still occupying the job, and the candidate testing took an eternity. Nobody had expected her to stand up for herself since she was a single mother with a young child at the time. Since there is a law here which fines courts if they take too long to respond to a formal letter, one can only imagine how much money this might have cost him and how frustrated they must have been for having to sort through all this stuff themselves. She walked away smiling and never looked back.